Hey, what's up everyone? Tim Stoddard here, and in this video, I am going to share with you my 7 rules that I use to build my business. These are more like daily reminders and first principles, but I refer to these rules almost every day to help me make the right decisions in order to build my companies. Let's get started. Rule number 1, do what is essential. I got this rule from the book Essentialism, written by Greg McKeown. This book came to me at a really important time in my life. I was juggling way too many things, and more importantly than juggling too many things, I was like making too many decisions. There was too many choices that I felt like I needed to make, especially in terms of my marketing. And essentialism can be described really in one phrase, and that one phrase is less but better. In almost every successful company and really successful endeavors in general, simplicity is at the core of the structure of the company. It's really at the core of like the mechanisms behind how the company or the organizations run. I needed to simplify, and I needed to continuously audit what was essential, both in my company and in my life. And so, out of all the core principles that I'm going to talk to today, essentialism is probably the most important because a lot of the following 6 principles sort of fall underneath the umbrella of essentialism and simplicity. But less but better. That is a mind frame that has completely changed my life. And my life is a lot simpler, a lot more streamlined, much more minimalist, and ultimately much more successful since I brought the concept of essentialism into my life. Rule number 2, 10x is easier than 2x. When I was in Thailand a couple years ago, I needed a book and I just randomly picked up this book. The book is called 10x is easier than 2x. It's written by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is a business coach who teaches this principle. And Benjamin Hardy was somebody that basically said, like, I love what you're doing. Let me write the book for you and we'll co-author it together. And so anyway, I was in Thailand and I read this book and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The idea behind the book is that there's no difference in how hard you have to work to build a small company than a big company. So for instance, me and the guy or the woman who is running the local pizza shop probably work the same amount of hours, right? But my business is going to generate a whole lot more cash and a whole lot more profit than the local pizza shop. And it's got nothing to do with how hard people are working. So there's an important distinction here because hard work is sort of like the baseline. You have to work hard if you want to be successful, period, because everybody works hard. And so working hard is kind of the default. But in reality, getting to a 10x business as opposed to a 2x business is about the decisions that you make. Growing by 10x is actually easier than growing by 2x because when you grow by 10x, you remove yourself from the labor of the day to day and you focus all of your effort on making the right decisions, making the decisions that will create scale and will create like really exponential growth in your company. So once you see your business from this frame of reference, you notice all of the places that you're compensating for your lack of knowledge and really for the anxiety that making hard decisions has by working harder. And so most business owners, instead of making hard decisions that have risk attached to them, they avoid those decisions simply by working harder. They just grind harder. And that's actually a much harder way to build a big business than to simply focus on making the right decision. So 10x is easier than 2x was a concept that like really revolutionized my thinking. And I see all of my decisions through that lens and through that viewpoint. All right, rule number 3, who, not how. This is another book written by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. When I finished reading 10x is easier than 2x, I was kind of hooked on the concept. And so I read Who Not How. And it's a similar concept, but the biggest differentiation is that when you first start off in business, you have to learn how to do everything yourself. It really is just about doing all of the work and working as hard as you can. But very, very quickly and much faster than a lot of business owners really realize, very quickly the way to get things done is not to do them yourselves, but to find the right person to do it for you. And so, any chance I can, anytime there's a new problem or like a new initiative that I'm embarking upon, or a new skill or a new tactic that we're bringing into the company, I never try to learn it myself anymore. In fact, it's almost always the wrong decision to try to learn a new skill by yourself. The best thing to do is to build your network and find the people who have the skills that you need to make your company successful. Who, not how. This runs through my head all the time because my company is dynamic. There's always new challenges, there's always new things happening. And my initial reaction is always like, okay, how do I figure this out? And that's the wrong reaction. The right reaction is who can I find to figure this out for me? Rule number 4, shoot golden BBs and no silver bullets. So this concept came to me when Alex Hormozy released his newest book, $100 Million Leads. And from the release of that book, he was just creating a ton of content. And I wasn't listening to that much of it because I think Hormozy says a lot of the same stuff over and over again, like we all do. But there was one presentation he did in particular where he talked about the growth of Gym Launch. And he said that there really was no big decision that he made. There was no silver bullet that he shot that suddenly was like, whoa, this has been the real difference maker. It really was a series of like small, tiny, incremental improvements that had a compounding effect. And so the analogy is don't shoot silver bullets, shoot lots and lots of golden BBs. And that really is the right way to approach it. The reason that's challenging is because it's not natural for us to succeed with lots of little improvements. It never actually feels like you're doing anything. It never feels like you're getting some momentum. I think as human beings, we're looking for the big win, right? And I can honestly say in my life, like I've never had a big win. I've never had like a huge exit or a huge sale or, like the moment where I'm celebrating and I'm coming home and I'm like telling my wife about this huge monumental moment that I had in my business and my career. That's really never happened to me. However, if I look year over year over year over the past 10 years, every year has been a little bit better than the previous one. And I think that's actually a lot healthier for people's emotions because when people get big wins, like you see this in lottery winners all the time, we don't know how to handle it. And so scaling up your lifestyle in relation to your income is actually a much healthier way because I still really live the same way I lived 10 years ago. I mean, we have some additional expenses, but not really. I never had the huge payout where all of a sudden I could buy like Rolexes and a jet. And not to mention that stuff doesn't really interest me to begin with. But the point is that when you have success in small incremental wins, it leads to a few things. It leads to just a healthier business because big changes in business are really destructive. I mean, they really are. If you have ever been in the situation where you have to make like a huge tech change or like changing a CRM or something, it's very, very, very stressful. And it never actually works out the way that you hoped it will. Whereas if you make little incremental changes, you can wake up a year later and like you hardly even notice that anything happened. And so I really, really approach the growth of my companies through that mindset. I avoid shooting silver bullets. If there's a big change to make, I actually like purposely avoid it. I just avoid making the decision in general, and I continuously make small improvements over time. And the downside of that is it never feels like you have a big win, but the upside of that is that like you actually succeed. Rule number 5, all I do is win. So WIN is an acronym, WIN, and it stands for What's Important Now. This is a really cool story. Lou Holtz, I believe his name was. I'm almost positive that's his name. He was the coach for Notre Dame. And I don't know anything about college football. I definitely don't know anything about Notre Dame. to my knowledge, Notre Dame was on like a real winning streak for the course of a couple years. And somebody asked him, like, what is it that you do that allows your program to win over and over again, even though new kids and new personnel are filtering through the system? And he just said, all we do is win. And he didn't give any other context to that, which I think is pretty cool. But win stands for what's important now. And the idea is that in the course of a day, there's so many fires to put out. There's so many people that need your attention. You know, the analogy of a football player is like it's a stressful situation and your adrenaline's pumping and the crowd might be roaring or the crowd might be booing you. There's a lot of different things all fighting for your attention. But if at every moment you are ruthlessly focused on what the most important task at hand is, well, then you have no choice but to succeed. Like you succeed by default because you never trip and stumble over the endless distractions that are constantly bombarding you and are fighting for your attention. If all you do is the next most important thing to do, well, it's inevitable that you're successful because you're just systematically breaking down your order of operations in order of what's most important, right? Imagine if every single business in the world only ever did the next most important thing. Obviously, all of us would have a lot more success. The problem is that a lot of us get in our own way by making mistakes, and we make mistakes by doing things that are not important. I think a fun analogy here is in chess. There's another like really dorky computer game that I played for years and years called StarCraft. Chess and StarCraft are very similar. It's like a one-on-one strategy game, right? And you'll notice that most of the time, the winner is the person that made the least amount of mistakes. You see this in sports games all the time. Almost always, the loser is the person that made more mistakes than the winner did. And so if you constantly focus on what's important now, you win by not making mistakes. You win by just constantly doing the next right thing and avoiding those catastrophic failures. Rule number 6, and this is adjacent to all I do is win. But rule number 6 is avoid being stupid. This is a really great Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger has always been one of my idols. Same with Warren Buffett and just the philosophy of like get rich slowly. But Charlie Munger in particular had a couple of really great one-liners. He had a phenomenal sense of humor. You know, rest in peace to the goat. But one of his lines was avoid being stupid. You increase your chances of success a lot more by avoiding being stupid as opposed to proactively being smart. Like it's easier to succeed by not being stupid than it is to always make the right decisions. So I tell myself this a lot. There's a lot of decisions to be made, especially as like business becomes bigger and your decisions have more weight to them. Like the consequences, both negatively and positively, are are just a lot bigger when your business gets bigger, right? And so I make a lot of decisions through this frame of reference. Avoid being stupid. Rule number 7, audience first. So a lot of people know that Brian Clark was a hero of mine. He was the founder of Copyblogger. I used to read his work every day. It was a lot of Brian's work and some of the other people over at Copyblogger that helped me become a great entrepreneur. And so when I bought into Copyblogger before I owned it fully, when Brian and I were partners, I was really stressed out because Copyblogger at the time didn't actually have a monetization method. When Brian's former partners left the company, they sold their products. They sold the actual revenue generating assets. And Copyblogger is what was left. And Copyblogger itself isn't actually a business. It's just a blog. It's just like a media entity. And so when I bought that asset, I didn't buy a business. Like I just bought the blog and I needed to figure out how to start making some money. And it was very stressful and I was trying a lot of things. I was doing a lot of things. Not all of it, hardly any of it was successful, really. And I was talking to Brian about it, and Brian kind of hit me right in the face. He's like, Tim, audience first. Don't worry about all that stuff. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but in the day to day of running a business, it can get really easy to think like, how do I make this happen? How do I make this sale? How do I fix this problem? Right? How do I increase my revenue? There's like real specific objectives that we think we need to make. But Brian's philosophy, and it's a philosophy that I've really adopted, is audience first. So at the end of the day, if you're providing value to your audience, good shit is going to happen. And all of my career is a real testament to this. Even like my personal brand, even timstods.com, I hardly sell anything on my newsletter. I don't sell anything on my YouTube channel. Most of my content is free, and there's a couple of products on the back end. Nonetheless, like 90% of the work I do is just providing value to my audience. And it sounds irrational. It sounds like that wouldn't work. But in reality, if you keep your audience first, what you do is you establish proof and you establish trust. People trust me, and people know that I have had success in the past because I've shared all of that. And so when in doubt, audience first. Like if you have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that are causing you anxiety, and like, do I make this decision? Do I create that product? Do I figure out this sales funnel? Like, how do I make this work? Just take a step back and remember, provide value, put your audience first, and good shit is going to happen. My last rule number 8, and this is something that I learned from Jeff Bezos, of all people. And the rule is, what's always going to be cool? This is a question that I ask myself a lot. And in order to understand the question, you need to understand the context. So Jeff Bezos was on a podcast. I think it was the Lex Friedman podcast. And he was talking about the dot-com bubble and how at the time he saw businesses being started in every industry you could imagine. And he saw a lot of people chasing trends. And inevitably, the dot-com bubble burst, it popped, and all of those investors and almost all of those businesses lost all of their money. But Amazon succeeded, and not only succeeded, it's one of the biggest companies in the history of the world. And what really caught my attention about this interview was Jeff Bezos was talking about that, and he was talking about people chasing trends, and he went the opposite direction. He would ask himself, what's always going to be valuable? What's something that people are always going to appreciate? And so for whatever reason, I heard that and I thought the way it imprinted itself in my mind is what's always going to be cool. So he said that people are always going to want affordable products and fast, reliable shipping. People are going to want good prices and good shipping. That's always going to be the case. That's never going to change. And he built Amazon on that ethos. So as opposed to chasing a new trend, he decided to find something that was never going to go out of style. Like good prices and fast shipping is always going to be cool. And so I've really built the foundation of my entire business around that concept, specifically around the idea of lead generation. So when he said that, the first thing that came into my head is phone calls. Phone calls are always going to be cool. Since then, I've expanded my lead generation services, like text messages and inbound form leads and all of that stuff. But nonetheless, the idea is that if I'm a business owner, then I'm always going to be in need of people calling me to inquire about my services. And so that's why I decided to really go all in on boring but profitable services like lead generation. And out of all of the investments I've made, out of all the assets that I've built up in my portfolio, by far the most successful ones are the ones that like nobody knows about because they're boring, but they deal with real businesses on an enterprise level and they provide leads for businesses. It's cash and it's a really, really effective model that I love and that I'm good at. So anytime I start getting crazy ideas and I start thinking about new fancy products that like no one's ever thought of before, I always remember that interview with Jeff Bezos. And I always ask myself, like, what's always going to be cool? And at the end of the day, lead generation is always going to be cool. There's always going to be businesses that are going to pay me to generate leads for them. And so that's why I've focused so much of my enterprise on this boring and monotonous at times, but super, super profitable business model. And, I don't think I'm ever going to change that. I think I'll probably be doing this my whole life. And I'm totally fine with that. It sounds great to me. Honestly, I would much rather stick in an industry that's always going to be cool than chasing the latest trend all the time and like starting from zero every time I have a new idea. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys got some value from this. If you have any questions or if there's anything else that you want to comment or inquire about, please leave a comment. I read everyone. I try to reply to all of them as much as I can. Hey, do me a favor, please smash that subscribe button, and I will talk to you in the next video. Peace.